Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art2Life Podcast. Excited today to have my friend and entrepreneur and artist, Bonnie Christine, here. I'll let you speak in 1 second. I'm just going to give a little intro to Bonnie. So Bonnie is a pattern designer and a teacher for creatives. She's an artist, first and foremost. She runs this amazing company where she creates courses. She has an 8-week course called the Immersion, which gives people the tools and know-how to start and thrive in a surface design business. She also has a membership program called Flourish for the alumni of the Immersion course. But more than anything, besides a friend and fellow creative, she's just a super, real inspiration to me and hopefully you too now, about leveraging the creative know-how of an artist and applying it to life and business. So today we're talking about entrepreneurship. And this is not something that I dive into a lot, but I find it's really a missing piece for a lot of artists. And so we got to talking this morning and we're like, we should cover this. So Bonnie, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Nicholas, thank you so much. As soon as you mentioned this, I was all in. Lucky to call you a dear friend and also love talking business with you. Just when you were introing this, it reminded me of this thing that happened to me when I was younger. I went to business school and my family were a family of entrepreneurs. No one had gone to college. So I was the first one. And so naturally I went to business school. And when I graduated, then I decided that I wanted to be a fabric designer and learn surface design and illustration. And I really kicked myself for like a solid year, regretting not going to art school. Almost went back, filled out application, all the stuff. And then I went into a gallery one time and an art gallery, and a man was working there. And I was kind of lamenting to him over this. And he said, yeah, but you know what? You could be the best artist in the world, but if you don't know how to market your work and sell your work, you'll never be successful. And that just really stuck with me because I actually think the opposite is true too. Like maybe you don't have to be the best artist in the world, but if you have the business know-how, you can still be successful. And so I love marrying the two so much.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. And just for those folks who are coming in here and they might not even know what surface design is. First of all, let me say that Bonnie's been on this podcast once before. It was a year or two ago. It's episode 22, and she dives into her whole background and all the amazing things she's doing. So that's a good one to go listen to, episode 22, to learn more about Bonnie. But just to catch people up, tell them what is surface design? I mean, give us what do you help people do? And then we'll dive into the business side of it.
Surface design is artwork that goes on any surface. And so you're thinking about all the things, even from where you're sitting right now, that has art on it. Everything from rugs and mugs and wallpaper and all of the things. And then my kind of specialty is surface pattern design. So that is for any product that requires a repeating pattern. So you think about fabric, wallpaper, tape, washi tape, ribbon, all of those kinds of things. And so it's one segment of surface design, the larger umbrella, and it's an incredible industry. Typically how we work is that we're artists. I mean, everything I do starts on paper with pencil and paint, and then we transition it into an Adobe program, usually Photoshop or Illustrator. We create repeating patterns, and then we license that work to companies that need artwork all over the world. And so you get to do it from wherever you live in the world. And it's incredibly fun.
I started in an illustration background, really. I didn't have the confidence to just go for it and hope that galleries could sell enough of my work. So I kind of did a half step for me, which was doing projects, commercial illustration for book covers and magazines and everything. And One thing and there used to be this big divide between, oh, well, you're a commercial artist if your work appears on a book cover, and you're a fine artist if it just appears in a gallery. But it's so different today. You've got amazing artists doing skateboard decks and clothing, and the all pervasive approach to being a creative, that's up right now. And so for those of you guys listening, don't try to just open your mind as to like where your work could fit. I mean, that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit here. You make you make something, and it's like, where else could this be? And so I love how you're approaching it. Like it's anything, it's anything that we come in contact with. It can be a painting, it can be a ribbon, it can be, a wall hanging, or what, it's kind of mind expanding.
Yeah, I have students that come in that have no art background at all. And then I also have a lot of students who come in identifying as a fine artist. And these people are so much fun. And I have to do a little bit of coaching, right? Because we're not going to try to make your illustration work look exactly like your fine art. We're going to say, like, how would it look if you illustrated some? And you can still use all of that kind of fine art technique that you have. In fact, you're leaps ahead of someone without experience. But most of the time, my fine artists fall in love with surface design because aside from prints, typically your fine art is do it and sell it, do it and sell it. And when you begin licensing your work, then you do it once and you sell it over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
And so it's a great thing to layer in to your fine art business.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Just from a cash flow perspective, and just, what is the mix? I always said to myself, if I could just afford to have a room where I got to do whatever I wanted in art, that's the dream come true. And it's like, well, what do you have to do to make that happen? How do you buy? How do you pay for? How do you manage to give yourself as much freedom as possible? And for some people, it's like they do a day job and then they do their art, or maybe they sell a certain thing, or, pattern design. I did both for many, many years. I sort of loved doing book covers, so it wasn't a problem, but I definitely always had my personal work on the side. And now I'm just doing that more and more and more. And teaching became that. Like, I really love teaching. So it's like, well, I'll do that too,
Yeah.
In terms of entrepreneurship, so moving into this, what would you say? And like, there's so many parallels between creatives, artists, everyone listening to this call, and entrepreneurs. And I don't think, and it was a surprise to me when I sort of became one, or ended up being at a conference where it was mostly business entrepreneurs, how well I fit in. And there's a lot of similarities. And I just thought I'd like highlight some of them, because if you can embrace this entrepreneurship as well as your fine art, like strengthen both of those muscles, you can ultimately, create a lot of freedom for yourself. So both of them are creative. Both take a tremendous amount of passion. There's risk taking involved in both. There's independence, innovation, resilience, self-expression, adaptability, and vision. And the last one, which I love, is impact. But right, like, isn't that amazing? Like that those are all the pieces of being an artist as well as an entrepreneur. I never kind of put that together till later.
I think that entrepreneurship it's a type of art form, meaning the most successful entrepreneurs in the world are very creative, and they may not be putting paint to paper, but they are incredibly creative. And so you don't have to learn that part of it. You may have to learn how to become an entrepreneur, but you've got the creativity,
Mm-hmm.
you've got the willingness to innovate and to try new things. And that's really what makes you completely stand out from the crowd when you're doing this, because you've got that extra thing that you're applying to your entrepreneurship.
It's that willingness to try something and then see what happens and then fix it and try it again. I mean, that's all I'm doing in my studio is I try something and then I adjust and I try something. But in business too, and I know, we've talked a lot about running courses and everything and the belly flops that happen along the way. I mean, right? Like how do, that's a huge part of it, this iteration thing.
Yeah. I even go so far as to say, like, if you are an artist and you're not being business minded, you're not being an entrepreneur, like, how selfish of you. Because your job as an artist is to get your work out into the world. It's to impact the way people feel when they walk into a room and the emotion that they feel when they look at your work. And so it's really your duty to get your message heard. And you know what
Yeah.
that's called? Marketing.
Uh,
It's just marketing. It's getting your message heard. And you've got to understand that you're solving a problem. I talk about this with my students a lot because I think they think that they're not solving a problem. And we just have to consider the world for a moment without art in it, without music and art and theater. And it's not a world that any of us want to live in. And so as artists, we're actually solving an immense problem that every human needs in their life. And so it's really our purpose and our duty to learn how to market it and get it out in front of people so that they know our solution exists.
Oh, yeah, that's so great. Like, if you don't do it, no one's going to come along and do this for you. So I'm curious, if I'm an artist listening to this, or maybe some of your students, like the idea, like, how do you start thinking of your work in terms of solving a problem? Like, you're really into this thing. You're just making these, like, how do you, I know story's a part of it, I'm just sort of curious how you approach this and start to unpack this for people.
I think there's two ways to sell something. And we kind of, if we go way back, we have to, first of all, get comfortable selling something. Because if you're making something, you're making it because you want to sell it. And if you want to have a business, you have to sell something, have a business. So we're in the business of selling stuff. Okay. We have to embrace that first. And then we have to embrace the problem that we solve. And I think there's two ways to sell. One is like, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. And the other one is tapping into like the emotion of selling. And this is where we get a little nerdy, but I know this is true about you too, Nicholas. Like, I love to be sold to when I'm being sold to well. Even if I can see what they're doing, if you're selling to me well, I'm like, I'm here for it. And so there's this analogy that I think about all the time. It's like this, like two guys who mow lawns for a living, right? And one of them is like, hire me, I mow lawns. And the other one taps into the emotion behind it and talks about how it feels to have an unkept lawn, how it feels like if you are embarrassed as your neighbors drive by because clearly you can't keep your lawn tidy. And then all the way to like not being able to invite someone over to your house because your lawn is unkept. And that person gets booked way more. And so how do we apply that to what we do? It's literally like, I'll talk about wallpaper, but same for you would be like art on the wall, right? It changes the way someone feels when they see it and when they walk into a room, all the way down to being proud of their space, being excited to invite people over. And, I think everyone listening can identify with how it feels to be in an uninspiring place. If you have just that one room, I have one room in my house and I'm like, oh, I just can't figure out what to do in there. And, I just close the door. And like the difference between feeling that way and feeling like this room is like a direct reflection of my soul. And I'm so proud of it. I am creative in it and I'm at peace in it and it feels good. And so really that's what we're tapping into when we're selling art or wallpaper. It's like the feeling that someone is going to have once they have this in their house. It's not just like the paint on canvas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's connected to this, for those of you listening, part of this as artists is to really get clear about what you're feeling when you're making it, what you've put into it, and be able to talk about that, because this is the honey that everyone's coming for. They too want to feel this, right? Like, I don't have a business plan for people who are just doing something to make a dollar. I think neither of Bonnie or I are really talking about that. And so not, how to sell more widgets. We're talking about sort of connecting to the emotional, like there's a truth to this. There's an actual true desire. And it comes from your own innate, what you care about, this curation of your art. And you've spent your whole life and you make this thing, and you can express it, and the work gets very expressive, but the way you talk about it and where you hang it and the kind of galleries you use or how you post about it and talk about it, all of that contributes into the offer or what people are buying when they buy it, because they want a piece of you. They want to have that will make their life feel good, providing they're into it. Now, not everyone's going to be there, but the people who are, that's the home run. And then so you're solving a problem, but you're solving it for a select group of people. It's not just like, well, I mean, maybe, it's like, what was Thomas Kincaid, the painter of light? He painted all those kind of schmaltzy houses and, very cute. And the whole world loved them, but apart from that, we're talking about the right thing for the right audience,
Yeah, and one way that I do this is I release work in collections, which I suspect that a lot of your students do as well. They kind of release a collection, and my collections are always based on a story. And I believe that we went into kind of how I do this in the last episode.
Episode 22.
Telling the story of your work and why you're making it, and then relaying that as you present it to the world makes it go so much deeper. It makes it resonate with the people that, it's like, well, they want a piece of that. Every time they look at the work, they want to feel what you felt when you created it.
Yeah, I love that you're working on a body of work and sharing. And I've seen your Instagram and I know you, sharing the journey of making the art becomes as important, as interesting as the finished result. It adds so much value to the final thing.
Yeah. So like, I haven't shared this yet, Nicholas. I don't even think I'm really allowed to, but I'm just going to squeeze it in there. But this last collection that I'm working on, I love to garden. I think we have that in common.
Yeah.
I do about half vegetables, half flowers. But the cool thing about this collection is that every single element, and there are hundreds of elements in this collection, every single one of them was like from a seed that I planted and I grew in my own garden. And then I pressed it, photographed it, dried it, and I referenced all of it. And so my hope is that means that when someone uses this, and this collection will likely end up on fabric first and then many other surfaces, that they feel like they have a piece of my garden in their hands.
That is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship, and when you say it's marketing, or marketing is that's kind of a dirty word, but what it means is just thinking about not just your experience, but how you're going to be perceived outside of you. And I think that's a good view to have. Obviously, we don't want to make art from that place. We don't want to be like, well, what is the world, what will does everyone like this? And I'll do this. What's the popular color? And look it up. But I think it's a good perspective to hold, where it's not just your own little world, but also how people will perceive your own little world. That's good information to have. And I mean, how you're describing what this personal collection is going to be, how people might feel, I think is great, because if you don't articulate that, it might not happen. It's just kind of, it's a really great idea, broadens it so much,
you've got to communicate that with the release. Otherwise, you would look at this and maybe you would really never connect that there's a real story behind it. And so the story is, in my mind, it's like the marketing, right? It's getting your message heard in a way that feels impactful and personal and emotional. And that's what gets people excited.
Totally. They want to buy into that story. Absolutely. There's so many businesses. I mean, everyone from Starbucks to, and sometimes it's phony, but truly businesses, just like art, are started often from a need, a personal need, right? I know this was my case, and I'm sure for you too. It was something that I had to do for myself. It wasn't convenient. I wasn't sure at all. And it grew into something. Art2Life grew into something, but it came out of an actual tremendous hard time in my life where I ended up relying on my art more to like help me out. And then I learned that kind of worked. And so I started teaching that. But connecting entrepreneurship is connecting it always back to the personal. I mean, don't you think? I mean, it's like that, at least the kind that we're involved in.
Yeah, 100%. It's really about having a heart for people. And I mean, there are lots of different kinds of entrepreneurship, but me and you run a very similar kind of business. And it's like, for instance, in my business, we measure our success only by the success of our students and our members, meaning we don't measure it by how much money we made or if we hit certain metrics. We only measure it like, did our students get results? Did they finish what they showed up to do, and then have they had measurable success from that? Then we're doing the work that we were born to do. And if they're not, then we really have to reevaluate what we're doing here and why we're doing it. So it's very heart-centered. In fact, I don't really use the word marketing.
I don't either.
I use the phrase heartfelt marketing because I think it is important to market yourself, right? But it can be authentic. It can be full of integrity. It can be full of heart, and it can be heart-centered to the people who are receiving it, seeing the whole person and truly having something that will radically change their lives and really being all in on wanting that for them.
Yeah. It's interesting that, again, we have grown up with, and this sort of general belief out there is that, business and art are separate. And this is something I've just struggled with a little bit, in terms of I'm making a personal thing, and there's this teaching to it, and I do my fine art. But what I found is that the more I'm willing to, the more personal it becomes. I mean, even, heartfelt, crying about a challenging time in my life to my audience, or talking about a painting really truthfully, what I was going through and how it was working or not, the more that I can be myself, for sure in my art, obviously, the more authentic you can be, but also in this funny entrepreneurship business thing, the better I do. I mean, people connect to that. And they trust that. Can you speak to that a little bit about this personal thing? Like, it's really personal. It's just like fine art. Entrepreneurship, the best kind of entrepreneurship is it's personal,
Yeah. My art director that I work with the most says that releasing a new collection of work is like taking all your clothes off and standing in front of a crowd and being like, well, what do you think? It is incredibly vulnerable if you make work like we do. And I think maybe something worth addressing is, likely in your community and in mine as well, some people take a different route. Some people follow trends, they make commercial work, and they very much only make what there is a demand for. So they typically work from briefs. They may have like a wide range of abilities and skills. So they're not necessarily have a signature style and that kind of thing. And that's okay. I think that gives a lot of freedom and happiness to people. some people don't want the vulnerable. And I'm like, I can understand why. And then, my kind of approach is to kind of put my blinders on and make work that feels like a direct reflection of my soul, and then kind of bearing it to the world and seeing who it resonates with. And that is the more vulnerable way to do it. But it has also always really worked. And I think that it does kind of call or beckon a deeper connection to the work. It also very much lets someone draw into your world and connect your persona, like Nicholas Wilton, with your work. And it's just a different route. But that doesn't mean that we can't also be business minded, right? So we can do that. And then we can also be business minded. Like, I think I'd love to hear what you think about this. I think some fine artists are kind of trapped in that, like, I don't want to use the phrase like starving artist, but kind of like, I shouldn't expect to be successful. And like my torment kind of makes my work stronger.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. And then, like, I love to just flip that mindset upside down. Like, well, can you create work that is completely true to you, but also be business minded and be successful? Because there's really no reason for an artist to struggle anymore, as long as you're willing to kind of do the business part of your business.
A little bit, right? To put your work out there so those who are interested in it can find it.
It's almost like that fear of success. It's a fear-based mindset as opposed to an abundance-based mindset. And rightfully so. I think that if we really unveil ourselves, we all are a little bit afraid of success. Like, what if this thing blows up? What if I, get huge on social media, and then I have like there's always things that you'll have to manage at different levels. And so I think some of us are like, yeah, I don't know if I could be accountable to that amount of success. And so we close ourselves off to it. And so what if we just rip that off and say we are open to that amount of success? There's nothing that'll come my way that I can't handle and figure out. And then watch just the top blow off of your ceiling.
Yeah, I notice it oddly enough regarding this podcast. So I know so many artists and there's so many great conversations. And then I have a sort of short list of people that I would like to interview that are pretty mega big. And, like I did a bunch of the covers for Brene Brown, and I really would be really kind of, I don't think I would ever have the opportunity that she would come and do my podcast, but the fact that I haven't asked her, there's I have a little bit of what you're talking about. Like, there's absolutely no reason. I'm the perfect person to interview her. Because I've already done a lot of work with her. I know her thing. She owns my art, but there's a part of me that's like, I don't know, not today, so I get it. And it's almost like I have to kind of just, why not me kind of thing. And I think you're onto something for sure. As bad as hard as that is to admit it. And I'm pretty giving to myself. I'll go for it, but I just noticed how I've kind of like, I also want to be on some podcasts because I think I'd be perfect, I'm busy.
I just worked through this, Nicholas. There is a conference that I want to be a keynote speaker at. And I spent a week like looking at their application and trying to figure out if I know anybody who knows anybody there. And then I'm like, no, they'll never let you do this. And then I'm like, I am the perfect person. I'm like the person that would be the perfect fit for this. And so I'm just telling you, today I sent an email and a voice DM to their Instagram. They have no reference of me. And I just said, hey, I'm the perfect fit.
Yeah.
We'll see. Because we don't want to hear no. And like, I might hear no. And every no is a really good thing. It means that we tried.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We sometimes I think we determine the rate at which we advance, right? It's definitely something that we're in control of. You know the the entrepreneur Tim Ferriss, right?
Yeah.
Well, he has this newsletter little thing he sends out every Friday, and I've gotten it. I don't know him, but he, along with about a gajillion other people, if you've noticed this, I have, that making art has become a new strategy for wellness, right? It's just like everyone, the neuroaesthetics, everything, it's all indicators are pointing towards art as a way to feel more alive and feel more joy and to feel more complete. So all kinds of people are wanting to do art, him included. And he's taking lessons and he's doing his thing. And it's like, oh my God, I'm the perfect person to help that guy. I know his deal. I know where he's coming from, you know. Of course, there's no way for me to reach out to him because I don't know, like I could just, you can only use Twitter or whatever. But I see these things like that. Like, no, I know how to teach that guy. I'm the guy who should be coaching him, not this other guy who's not doing a very good job. But sometimes you just have to stop and go for it, you know, and do whatever you can take to make those things happen.
So is what you're saying, Nicholas, that you're committing to me to reach out to both Tim and Brene by the end of the week?
Yeah, I guess I am. Thank you for that.
Because you're the perfect person for both of those things.
Yeah. So, okay.
It's hard to recognize that in ourselves. Like
it is.
Because it feels like too proud. But listen, everyone who's listening to this, you know the next step you have to take. You know it, and you're not doing it. So I'm going to challenge everyone listening. That next thing that you know is a little scary, it's just outside your comfort zone. You're going to commit to it, and you're going to do it with me and Nicholas.
Yeah. Oh, and I love that. No, absolutely. Because it doesn't matter what level you're at. For some people, it might be posting on Instagram or Facebook something they've made. That is terrifying. And then you have to get used to that. And then the next thing is like you want to sell it or, you know, so we're all just doing the same thing, but it is literally just kind of getting out of your own way for sure.
You know, one of the things I talk about is stepping outside of your comfort zone, and like growth and comfort cannot exist together at the same time. And for some people, that's a real bummer, right? Like if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, the first thing you've got to do is embrace being a little bit uncomfortable. And we're not talking leaps and bounds outside your comfort zone. It's just a small step. And then you hang out there until you become comfortable. Your comfort zone has grown, but then immediately you have to very intentionally take the next step just outside your comfort zone again, because growth and comfort cannot coexist. That's, I think, what really separates the entrepreneurs. Like, are you willing to be uncomfortable? Are you willing to kind of, you know, have it in your mind and on your shoulders at night? Some people are, and some people aren't.
Yeah, no, that is really great. I looked up entrepreneur in the dictionary because it's like, well, what exactly, you know, it's like, is it like artists with money? I mean, what is this? But it really spoke to, it says it's a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses. And I put in business as doing anything. So someone who organizes and creates something. And here's the key part: taking on greater than normal risk in order to do so. That's what it is. And it's like, as soon as we start risk taking, and you know this in your art, you know that painting, it doesn't change. You dabble around with it, being safe around the edges all week long. And then finally, at the end of the week, you're so frustrated, you do something, it's like, boom, it comes together. We're entrepreneurs in our fine art, but we also have to become entrepreneurs for our art. And I think what you're saying about this risk taking, just a little bit, just stepping into it a little bit, is absolutely key. That's such a great way to describe it.
You know, I also think about, you and I both have teams at this point, people who help us in our business. And that's something I never saw coming. I was a solopreneur for a decade. And now I have like 12 people on the team. And part of me was like, well, I just had a lot of hangups about that. Like, well, if they can really do it as good as me, wouldn't they just be an entrepreneur? Right. And like
Yeah. Yeah.
that nobody can do it as good as me mindset.
Yes, totally.
It's so false because the world is full of incredibly capable people who can do it probably better than me and you, but they're not willing to have the risk. It's they don't want the risk taking part. They want the security of a job, even though they can do much of the same thing that we do better, but they don't want the risk part. And so my team is full of people who are doing work better than me. They just don't want the risk.
Which is so understandable. Like it kind of
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, actually, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to get over that as well. This thing of, I mean, I used to believe that the opportunities that happened to me and the good luck things that happened to me was because I worked my tail off. And it's you if you kind of expect good things to happen to you. And the reason I thought that was because I was working harder than everyone else. And this was a flawed problem. So let me make sure you don't do this. But for many years, I just worked really, really hard. And because of that, and I knew that I worked harder than everyone else, so I deserved good things to happen to me. And good things did happen to me. I had opportunities and things like that. And well, that's because I worked harder. But it took me a long time to realize that it actually wasn't because I worked harder. It was just because I believed that I was eligible. So it's much better to learn how to believe that you're deserving, and you do not have to kill yourself all the time. In fact, it's much more there's much more wisdom in choosing the parts that you're good at and you love, and then finding people that are really good at the other things you're not so good at, and making a team.
Yeah. Oh, you are eligible. That makes me think of this saying you've probably heard, that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And
No,
like
I've never heard that. This is what? Okay, say it again. This is so good.
God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And like if you're familiar with the Bible, this is all throughout it. People who are not qualified get called to do tremendous things. And so that's true for us as well. We don't have to have some set of qualifications. Like we're called to do great things, and we'll get qualified along the way because we're eligible.
Yeah, wow. Which is just like fine art, by the way. It's just like art making. You can't imagine where you're going to end up. What started as like a little side hobby becomes more important. And I remember the first time that I felt like I was an artist, and I was about 11 years old. And my dad was pretty stingy with feedback, very stingy. And but I showed him a picture that I had done, and it was an abstract drawing. And everything else up to that point, I would copy things. You know how you copy from pictures and magazines? And he was kind of encouraging. But I showed him this little weird thing I did. It was based off a plant. And it's all made up. I still have it. And he was really taken with it. And he said, you know, what's incredible about this is that this doesn't look like anybody else's. You know, this is of you. And I mean, he really, like, it was like a different kind of encouragement I got. It was one of the first things I did that was personal. I mean, that I made. And so that started me going, oh, well, what else can I make? What else can I make? And it's just like you say, you know, you might not be qualified when you start, but nothing like doing it and adjusting as you go to become to achieve great things. I mean, it's totally, totally possible. And I just love that because everyone gets to be invited, you know?
Yeah, I think we all feel called to do something great, and sometimes we just don't really know what it is. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to feel like I was called to do something great, and I just didn't know what that would be. I thought, like, am I going to be like an actress? And I'm like, no, I can't act for anything. I just didn't know. But I was willing to just lean into it and see where it went and see what avenue it took me. And I worked hard too. You know, I probably felt like my success came a lot from just working hard, but like eventually it does have to shift. Like you can't just continue to, like, if you want to double your results, you can't just continue to double your effort over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has to be this different perspective, like eligibility and having a vision for where you want to go.
Yeah. One of the questions that you might ask yourself. So we all have the same amount of time and we all don't have enough. So if you want to do better, if you want to sell more work, if you want to produce more work, if you want to all the time things, a good question might be, and this is where I started, what could I do? What could I hand off to somebody? What's possible to teach somebody something so they could do a small part of this thing that I do? It could be literally like, preparing the canvas, like I've done that before, photographing the artwork, like I used to do all that myself, and that's a really good first step, right? To just start asking yourself, wait a second, do I have to do every single piece of this, even the parts I don't like? Surely somebody can help me. That was the beginning of it. And I think that's a really good first step.
This is where my focus has been for the last few years because we do everything ourselves. And I think that is part of what makes us successful because we can get a little scrappy and we can figure stuff out, but no way are we actually experts at all of it. And no way are we really loving every piece of it. And so a few years ago, I kind of started just focusing on what if I got to where I'm doing only the things that only I can do. And for instance, the things that only I can do are things like this, right? So my voice, my
Mhm.
like video presence, real life stuff like being a mom to my children and a good wife and like certain things that only I can do. Um the thought, like the vision of the business and the thought of where we're headed. But then all of the other stuff, like just the list goes on and on about the things like all the way down to packaging and shipping, art prints and all of the stuff that we're doing ourselves that like let alone stuff in the home, right? So like cleaning and grocery shopping and all the things that we're doing that we're trying to excel at. What if you made a list of only the things that only you could do, and then just start getting a little bit of help along the way because it'll free you up to do more of the things that are actually in your zone of genius?
Yes. One thing that helped me a lot, because I have a feeling I know what a lot of folks are thinking as they're listening. Yeah, well, easy for you to say, I am just barely hanging on here. I only sell 6 out of the 10 paintings I make, or, I don't know all the circumstances. But what helped me, and it's funny, is a couple things. When I started thinking about getting help in my art, I created 4-digit ID numbers for my art so I could track them easier. Every painting got it. And I started with 001, 002, 003. So I had a way I created a database. At least I could have somebody enter all this in there and I could track things. So it wasn't like, where is that painting of a pirate ship? You did it about 3 years ago. I think it's like 5 feet tall. What room is it in? So getting really organized like that was one of the most helpful things, just to sort of get my thinking dialed in so somebody could actually help me. But then what I started doing is, my limiting belief was the fact that I couldn't afford to have someone help me, because the only reason I'm surviving is because I do everything myself and I do it as cheap as possible. So what I did, I literally started writing down how long I would spend on a painting. I would log the hours. I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I would make a painting, and it would be anywhere from 8 hours to 25 hours. Sometimes they would take much longer. Some of them were crappy. Some of them were good. But then I would track how long it took me to make them. And then I would track over time which ones sold and how much money I made. The gallery took half of it. And then I worked backwards, and I realized that I was selling about, I think it was like at the time, like 6 or 7. That was my batting average. Like I make 10 paintings, I'd sell half of them roughly.
Yeah.
And I would make so much money. And then I divided it all up and I was like, oh my God, I'm making $125 an hour doing
Yeah.
fine art. Like, and back then that was like a lot. Could I afford to hire somebody, right? Because for $20 an hour, if my time is worth $125 an hour, because I would prefer actually to do 11 paintings a month instead of 10 and have
Right.
somebody else type in the database and do all the things. That was a really an eye opener for me. Do you know your batting average? Do you know how much art you do sell? Do you know what your time's worth? Right. It speaks to Dan Martell's book, right? That,
Oh,
yeah. It's called Buy Your Life Back, or no, what? Buy Back Your Time. Dan
so
Martell. We'll put it in the show notes. But does that make sense to you? Do you relate to that?
I did the exact same thing. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to simplify it even more. I actually just for a keynote that I delivered, and it was all about getting help in your business. And so I went back and I did some math. And so if you want to just do rough numbers, right? You take your annual gross revenue and you divide it by the number of hours that you work. And so if you work 40 hours a week, that's 2,080 hours in the year. So let's say you make $100,000 a year, right? And then you
Uh-huh.
divide that by 2080, then you're roughly making 48 hours for sorry, $48 an hour. And so I went back into my journey and I looked at my tax statements, and this is where I was at. So in 2012, when I was 4 years into my business, my hourly rate was $9 an hour.
No
And
way. Oh
yeah.
my God.
And so I wasn't having any help. I couldn't hire anybody for less than that. I was doing everything myself because that's what I had to do. And now none of this clicked for me until way too long. And so about 10 years into my business, I did this again. And my hourly rate was $115 an hour. And then I started hiring. So by that philosophy, anything that I could hire out for less than I cost an hour, I should, because that would free up an hour for me to make that money back. So I
Right.
started hiring, and literally, Nicholas, my graph, there's like an elbow right here. When I made my first hire, that was 4 years ago. And in the last 4 years, my hourly rate has gone to over 2,800 and something dollars an hour. And it all
Wow.
has to do because I was refining what I was personally doing and outsourcing everything else that I possibly could. But yeah, that took forever. It took me like 14 years to figure that out, or a good 10 years to figure that out.
Yeah. It's you just keep adding to that and adding to that. And the reason it really pays off though is because you get your energy back, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't, I mean, I love gardening. I'm trying to think of something I would have to do right now. I probably would love actually to go weeding, but I don't know, pulling floorboards up or something. There's
Yeah.
certain things that I just that don't light me up. And if I stay in the groove more, and it's just like fine art, right? If you stay in the work that kind of gives you energy, and
Yeah.
then it just gives you energy. And that's really the currency. That's really the value we're talking about. We're putting dollar signs on things, but it's your energy. It's the fire that you have to do things and talk about things. And that translates. We're talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about the story. We're talking about your enthusiasm around your artwork. And that translates, man. People can feel it. It's like, this is the best damn art in the world. I'm spending my whole life doing it. And you can buy it or not, but there'll be never be another one of these. It's that kind of
Yeah.
like, I'm so in this, that gives people confidence. They buy your confidence. They're like, okay, I just want a piece of that. I want to hang this art up in my house so I get a taste of what it feels to be empowered in my life and to be fired up. It's so that's really the value. Yes, you make more money, but really you get more energy.
Like I generally kind of, I wouldn't use the word burnout, but I kind of hit a wall in the summer. It's after we've wrapped up and finished the big course that I teach. It's the slower season for the summer. My kids are at home, but I also just like don't want to. Like I'm just foggy brained. I used to think like, well, that was it. I was just done. I would never have an idea again. And then I learned that it was cyclical. Like it's
Yeah.
going to come back. It'll probably come back in the fall. But this year was different. And this summer, I have been so on fire. I've had so much mental clarity and focus. I don't have any mental fog. And I've been thinking about why. And there are a couple of reasons why I think maybe, but one of the biggest is because of this. I've been operating more in kind of that zone of genius than ever before, meaning I haven't been spending my time doing the things that drain my energy, but only the things that pour energy into me. And because of that, the business has taken off, the team is on a whole new level, but most importantly, like my family, we've had so much fun this summer because it's like
Yeah.
I can fully like do what I need to do and then unplug and be present and take time off and have weekends and like it the joy is contagious.
Yes.
Kids see you doing something that you love. Your spouse sees how happy you are. Like it's spills over into every aspect and it truly makes an impact on the people around you and that's really something to be said for.
Yeah, absolutely. The overflow, my therapist said it's about being self-centered. And at first you're like, what do you mean? I don't want to be self-centered. He goes, you absolutely do, because what that does for everyone around you, you fill yourself. And then certainly as an artist, creative, then that just overflows to everybody. And I know, you're talking about something that's been very hard earned. It wasn't so long ago. Like I remember you had a pretty rough summer, not so long ago. Like both of us have gone through really hard patches. It takes time to figure this out, but absolutely, it's worth striving for. It's your life's a work of art. It's like, how do you do art and how do you do life? And make it all so it just is this really awesome experience that gives you energy and doesn't deplete you. I mean, that's what entrepreneurship's about, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship is really the willingness to be like in relentless pursuit of that.
Mm.
And so you and I don't, I might have thought about giving up like once,
Yeah,
but not sitting around thinking about like, are we cashing in? No, it's much more creative than that. It's how do we pivot? How do we have a new idea? How do we tap into different creativity and how do we serve our people to the greatest of our ability? And yeah, it's just a different form of art. And man, I think creative entrepreneurs have to be just some of the most amazing, most fulfilled people in the world.
yeah, absolutely. Now, listen, you're doing a cool thing. I'm wrapping up here a little bit, keeping my eye on the time, but I want to have time for you to tell everyone you've got a really cool event coming up. I'm going to be part of it, but I'll let you describe it because I think a lot of the listeners would love to attend, and we'll provide a link for this in the show notes. But so, give us the quick
Yeah, well,
scoop on it.
our dear Nicholas is one of my keynote speakers.
Mhm.
It's actually perfect with this conversation. I do find that so many people think that they're left brained or right brained. And something that you and I have, and that I look for in people to host this event with me, are the people who really feel like they combine both the creative and like the strategic part of their brains. And so this is a conference. It's a 2.5 day conference called Immersion Live for the Professional Creative. And it's really about art and business. It's literally colliding art and business. And so we talk about very like inspirational things. Morgan Harper Nichols is going to be one of our keynotes, and then Amy Porterfield, and then you, and also Glow Atonmo. And we have a ton, like an incredible lineup. But the point is that it kind of goes back and forth between deeply inspiring artists and how they're showing up in the world, and then deeply inspiring business, like the strategy side of it, so that people really walk away with step by step, notebooks full of actionable things that they can do. Because, if you're here and you want to make a living doing something creative, like it's our goal to make that possible for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
coming up in October. It starts October 19th.
I'll put a link in the show notes, you guys. So, Bonnie, we could talk forever on this, but I think this is really up for a lot of people. It's like after COVID, a lot of folks are, realizing the value of the things they were making during COVID, and they don't want to go back to the way it was before, and they want to do something that has more meaning. They want to have more purpose, and creating a business around, just a livelihood, just creating a life, basically, centered upon what matters to you is certainly what I'm interested in helping people with. And I know you do the same. So really awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Bonnie. And again, you guys, check out the links on the show notes. You can also watch the video of this on YouTube, and also at art2life.com under podcasts. If you go to this episode, on the far right side is a little yellow bar, and you can ask a question, leave a comment. I'd really be curious. I'd love some feedback on where you are in this entrepreneurship journey. I'm starting to realize more and more, based on people's feedback, that this kind of information is really important and needed. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it. And also, if you have a question, I answer those questions on some episodes coming up. So please go ahead and leave. You can record a question there. So do that. And again, Bonnie, thanks so much for being here. Any last thoughts before we take off? Or
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with your people. They're amazing. So thanks so much.
Okay, great. Talk to you soon.